What's going on, everyone? I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle. We're here in the Eagle newsroom to break down a little bit of Texas A&M and Alabama. And who else to do that with than Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. Nick, how's it going, man?
Doing well. How about you? Ready for this matchup?
I can't complain.
We've been waiting a while.
I know. It seems this was going to be the matchup of the decade. This is what we were all looking for. It was, I think one reporter around here called it the West Virginia vendetta. Maybe it's rat poison versus the I don't know what it is. It's going to be a craziness, but a little bit of that luster has come out of whatever's going on because of A&M so far. Let's start, of course, with the vendetta, the back and forth that Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher had over the summer. You did a story on that for the Tuscaloosa News. Delve a little bit about what you found in what happened in that back and forth and what people had to say this far removed from it happening.
Yeah, Nick Saban lit the match, and then Jimbo kind of poured gasoline on the whole thing, and it didn't last very long. I mean, the fireworks were in May. We haven't really seen any fireworks since then, but I mean, that 24-hour period, less than really, I don't know if we'll see such a wild period of just back and forth between coaches in a while. That was something that I did not expect. That event in Birmingham was kind of, I don't want to say a throwaway event, but just an event that we did not expect anything that fruitful to come out of. I wasn't even actually there. We had there's an intern working for us who he had gotten an email about it, was willing to go, and him and our columnist Chase Goodbread were there. And most of the event was kind of, I mean, a dud, so to speak. I mean, there just wasn't anything that new. It's not that anything that they said was bad or was a bad event. Just in terms of covering it, there wasn't really anything that new said. Then toward the end, Nick Saban says that Texas A&M had bought its entire team. And that was not something that I think anyone expected. Then the next morning, as you well know, Jimbo Fisher calls a press conference, not much time. You were kind to help us out with that story. It still kind of made me smile thinking about how quickly you had to get out of, your house and get to this press conference. You had so little time. So it was kind of spur of the moment. Of course, emails showed later on that Greg Sankey kind of warned Jimbo that, hey, Saban's going to get publicly reprimanded, but if you go forward with this in the wrong way, you could also get that same penalty kind of thing. And Jimbo went ahead. He had that press conference for the Aggies, and I can imagine what it was like being in that room. You, of course, know what it was like being in that room. But ever since that day, it's kind of all fizzled. But at least if you were there for that show, you saw quite the fireworks display.
Yeah, it was a little bit of what just happened. Like you got blindsided by a little bit of a bus. You kind of expect coaches to go off on things, and we had an idea of what that was going to be about, but I don't think any of us knew to the level that he was going to take it. And it almost took seeing, I've told you this in the story, it almost took seeing people reacting to it on Twitter to kind of slap you back into reality and realize, oh, this is probably going to be the biggest storyline of the day, and kind of really digest everything that he was saying, because you are such in a bubble in some of those press conference rooms that you're like, yeah, okay, yeah, this is he said some things there. So anyway, but like you said, it was for as hot as it burned quickly, and by the time they went to SEC meetings and then went to SEC Media Days, it's over. Jimbo Fisher says they've moved past it, whatever that means. What did Nick Saban offer anything on it this week? I haven't gotten a chance to go back and watch that yet.
No, I mean, it really has not been discussed that much. You mentioned quarterbacks. In a lot of ways, that's been the biggest story, I think, out of both camps this week. Partly because the back and forth happened so long ago. It was so well covered, so well talked about. At this point, I think there is a little bit of fatigue and, just them talking about it. Frankly, us even asking about it to an extent. We've covered it plenty, but I think words aren't forgotten either. So I think that is why it persists to today. But really, to me, the biggest storyline has been the health of the quarterbacks. And so Nick Saban, he talked a little bit about Jimbo, but not in that context. It was more so, the whole, do you want me to call Jimbo and tell him what we're doing kind of thing. So that was really the only mention of Jimbo Fisher by name in the press conference on Monday and Wednesday. Wednesday, the press conference with Saban is kind of just tying up loose ends from the week of practice. And so that's a very brief press conference. But the Monday one, the main one, really no mention of the whole feud. And I think that, yeah, they have moved past it. But again, I think fans especially do not forget what they might see as disrespect from both sides in the whole thing.
Well, and we do know that Jimbo has been watching Nick Saban's press conferences because when we here in College Station asked him if, because Brent Zorneman from the Houston Chronicle asked him point blank if Haynes King would be starting, he said, "Well, what do you want me to do? Call Nick and tell him? I'll do that after. Come on, guys." And so just kind of echoing exactly what Nick Saban said about that himself. I think that was after the game when they were talking about what was going on with the quarterback. So kind of a funny little trade there. So let's get into that quarterback situation. At Texas A&M, of course, Max Johnson hurt his hand in the Mississippi State game, went out. Haynes King had to come in and play the into the fourth quarter. But meanwhile, a little bit earlier in the day, Bryce Young had hurt his shoulder in a game and out, and in comes Texas native Jalen Montrose. Did I say that? Milrow.
Jalen Milrow, yeah.
Milrow, yeah. It's been a day, everyone. Jaden Milrow comes in and fills that position. What is your gauge on what's happening there? What A&M fans might see in the quarterback situation?
Well, that's a great question. They've kept things pretty close to the vest and kind of inspired a whole day-to-day week, if you will, where we've heard that phrase many times in Tuscaloosa, many times in College Station. So, yeah, we don't know who's going to be a quarterback. I think that's by design. But if it's me, if Jalen Milrow, or I should say if Bryce Young is not completely healthy, you put Jalen Milrow out there. I mean, because this doesn't seem long-term, doesn't seem serious from what Nick Saban has said. So they got to play the long game here. Obviously, it'd be good to have your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback against A&M in a premier matchup like this. But the reality is that, I don't think A&M's going to be able to score that many points. And so just because, not only because of A&M struggles on offense, but really Alabama's defense is legit this year. I mean, this is a good Alabama defense. They've had some struggles at times years past, but this is an Alabama defense that's tough to score against. The third quarter was a little bit shaky from the defense, but against Arkansas, I should say. But overall, this defense has been near lights out. So you don't necessarily need to have a quarterback who can score you 45, 50 points. You just need a guy who's going to manage the game, who can be a threat on the ground is what Jalen Milrow's biggest threat. He can throw. Obviously, he's not Bryce Young, but to me, if Bryce is not fully ready, you got to make sure that shoulder's ready. So Jalen Milrow wouldn't surprise me if he's out there. But then again, Bryce Young has dealt with this kind of thing before, and Nick Saban said that he's gotten through it before. So he very well could be out there as well against the Aggies.
Jaden Milrow, of course, of Katy Tompkins down here near the Houston area. I think everyone knows of Bryce Young and what he did in the Heisman race. They might not know that Jaden Milrow was heavily recruited by the Aggies and was one of the finalists for him before he decided to end up going to Alabama. Jimbo Fisher said they recruited him pretty heavily up until that point. For those who didn't get to watch the game against Arkansas on Saturday, what is different about his game? How will Alabama's offense look different should he be the guy instead of Bryce Young?
He's a heck of an athlete, and Jimbo said this week actually about Jalen Milrow. But Jalen can run the football. I mean, like this guy is freaky fast. Call him Jimmy Johns because this guy can seriously move. There was a play, I think it was in the third quarter. It was in the second half, where everything actually it was the fourth quarter. Everything that could be going wrong for Alabama seemed to. I mean, you talk about a bad snap on a punt that Arkansas takes over on their, Alabama's 5-yard line. I mean, there's so many things going wrong in this third quarter for Alabama. And the thing that stopped the bleeding in the second half for the Crimson Tide was when you had like 3rd and 15. Things looked really bleak because Alabama was not passing. So it's like, okay, how are they going to get this first down? Jalen Milrow takes the team on his shoulders, runs for 77 yards. And after that, the game changed. And Alabama took over and won big. And so this guy in the open field, I asked Jahmyr Gibbs this because Jahmyr Gibbs is a heck of an athlete too that they added through the transfer portal from Georgia Tech at running back. Incredibly fast himself. I was curious who's faster between him and Jalen. And, Jahmyr said they haven't raced, but I'd love to see that race because you just think about two athletes. But Jahmyr Gibbs, it's not surprising that he's fast. But Jalen Milrow is a big dude. I mean, this is a big quarterback, yet he can run at crazy speeds. And so that's what really is the tough thing is you're talking about a guy who, when he has the football in his hands, he can make guys miss. He's willing to be physical, willing to run. So Texas A&M is going to definitely need to make sure that they contain him and keep him from running. But really, I think it's if he shows he can pass, that's going to be a really big problem for any defense because if he's a dual threat guy, then I mean, what do you try to stop? And so, and Bryce Young is athletic and he can scramble, but there's like athletic and being able to move. And then there's what Jalen Milroe, who's practically like a big run. Like he almost looks like a Derrick Henry running, and he's incredibly fast. And so he's a heck of an athlete, and he's someone I think as a defense I would not want to have to try to stop.
So the other side of this passing conundrum is the wide receivers, and of course, Alabama graduates and moves on to the NFL, a real stout group of wide receivers from last year. How would you grade how the wide receiving core has done so far for Alabama this season, and how much of a help will they be if they do have to help support a quarterback making his first start?
It's a great question. I give maybe a C plus. It's been good at times, not so good at times. I mean, this team does not seem to have at the moment a Jamison Williams, which who would? I mean, Alabama's been spoiled at receiver the last few years. They've had some fantastic players, churning out first round pick after first round pick. So far, there's not been that guy that every game is just a huge threat. Now, Tyler Harrell was a guy they added in the transfer portal who has that scary speed that we've talked about. Has not played yet. He's not been a guy who's been able to apply that talent yet or play just because he was hurt to start the year. And now he did warm up before the Vanderbilt game 2 weeks ago, but has not played yet. So once they can get him back in full speed, I don't know that he'll be Jameson Williams good, but I think he ran like a 4.2 at Louisville's pro day. Not that he was going out for the draft, but just he showed he can run that. So, I mean, they can get him back. That could be a huge addition to that offense. But overall, the receivers, no, we've not seen one guy be consistently just productive or good. You've had different guys step up at different times, like Ja'Cory Brooks. I think he had 2 touchdowns. There's a drive he had against Vanderbilt where he caught 4 passes, one of which was a touchdown. It was like the Ja'Cory Brooks drive. But then against Arkansas, he didn't look that great in some moments with some drops and things. And so, they don't have that consistent receiver production, which is why if Bryce Young were to be out for a bit, that could be a huge problem for this offense because the receivers just haven't played at a consistent level, that intensity Nick Saban wants and talks about. We just haven't seen it. Now, they have some freshman receivers who are kind of fascinating, have made some big plays against Arkansas. But those are young guys. And so the veterans need to make sure they step up at a higher level because it just hasn't been there every week.
Yeah, so we talked about the quarterbacks, talked about the wide receivers, and you mentioned the defense a little bit, which is very strong. We'll go to that same question that I normally start things out. What are some of the other storylines and things to look out for this Alabama team that we haven't discussed yet?
Yeah, to me, it's Devin A-Chain, right, is how you say that? I mean, you have a guy who seems like a great player. I think that's going to be the focus for this defense. But Alabama's been pretty solid against the run. There's not a whole lot of room there for offenses to go. And but the secondary also has been strong. I mean, that's the thing. This defense does not really have a lot of weak points. Now, something to watch, Brian Branch, he is one of their defensive backs. He had to leave the Arkansas game. Now, a lot of folks think that he might be back, but we don't know that. He had an injury, and it's the way Nick Saban talked about it. Doesn't seem long-term, but he's a guy who is fantastic for them in cover, just that great, chess piece that you can move around. So if he doesn't play, that is a bit of a loss. But overall, this defense just doesn't have a whole lot of weaknesses. And, of course, Will Anderson leads that group. And so I will be interested to see if this A&M offense can move the football against this Alabama defense because what we've seen so far from both sides it's not looking good for the Aggies in that regard.
Right. A&M has struggled this season so far, they're outside the top 100 in most of offensive categories on the season. They don't know if Max Johnson or Haynes King is going to be the guy moving forward, or to that right, Connor Wegman, who's going to be able to get the most action against this Alabama team. Of course, that's the biggest thing for A&M coming up in this game. So let's close it out with this. I think most weeks we would ask, what are some of the keys to the game that whoever the opponent is would need to do to ensure success. I think most everyone who is betting anything would probably be betting on the Crimson Tide, the number one Crimson Tide this week, over an A&M team that hasn't really shown much, especially offensively so far. So let's reverse this a little bit. What are some of the weaknesses? What are some of the things that Alabama might have struggled with that if those things those things are exacerbated, might prove a success for the Aggies in the game?
I think we talked about the main thing is the passing game. Even with Bryce Young, it struggled at times. The receivers just haven't always been consistent. So if A&M can force Alabama to try to beat them with the pass, I think they have a chance. But if A&M doesn't stop the run, it can be a long day for that defense. And so really, if it's me, if I'm the A&M defense, I'm focusing on stopping the run and make you beat me with the pass. But overall, there's just not Alabama weaknesses are relative to most teams that way. And I just, to me, it's maybe if you force Alabama into mistakes, like that would have to happen. But I think it's one thing to last year go to College Station where Alabama's riding a little bit high, went over Ole Miss, get caught sleeping a little bit. It's going to be tough to do that, Brian Denny. Fool me once, shame on me kind of thing, where it's just going to be tough to do it 2 years in a row. But I think if they're going to do it, you have to force Alabama into mistakes. Because I think was there a pick six or there was like a pick on the goal line, right, in the A&M game last year?
Yes. Yeah, there was a pick inside the red zone that turned the Tide in the first or second quarter. Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that was huge. So you have to have plays like that. You have to force mistakes. And so if it is, in fact, Jalen, I think it's, forcing him into mistakes is really your only chance. But purely on, just what we've seen so far, one-on-one, it's probably not going to work out well for A&M. So you're going to have to be creative. And I think that overall, you just have to force Alabama into mistakes. Because the other thing is, Alabama has not forced many turnovers this year. And so it's not necessarily going to be like, oh, we force a turnover, you're going to force one back. I mean, it's one of those things where, say A&M can force some turnovers, I don't know that the defense can return the favor for Alabama. So it's all about forcing mistakes. It's trying to maybe prey on that passing offense. And but overall, it's I'm not trying to say it's just from the Alabama perspective, but I just don't see a ton of paths to victory for A&M, but they absolutely have to force mistakes if it's going to happen.
And if it's Haynes King, he's thrown 4 picks in 3 games for the Aggies this season, so he might help out the cause as well if he's the guy to go. Nick, thanks so much for giving us some time. Let the people know how they can find you on social media and where they can find your work, including that story on the Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban spat.
Yeah, TuscaloosaNews.com is where you can check out my work and that of my talented colleagues as well. But yeah, just on Twitter @_Nick Kelly is where I'm hanging out the most.
Give him a follow. Read that story. It's good stuff. And also be sure to check theeagle.com and the Eagle moving forward as we get ready for this Texas A&M Alabama matchup in Tuscaloosa. Thanks for watching, everybody.